Magic the Gathering has printed over 30,000 unique cards. But every so often, a design comes along that feels like it broke loose from another dimension. In this video, we're looking at some of the weirdest and most unconventional cards ever printed. We'll start with Raging River. This 1994 oddity asks players to physically divide their creatures into two imaginary flanks, left and right. The wording is tangled, but the gist is this. When combat begins, each player splits their creatures into two camps, opposite banks of an imaginary river. Attackers choose their side, defenders do the same, and creatures on one bank can't interact with creatures on the other, unless they've got wings. Flyers ignore this geographic boundary. This oddball enchantment comes from the fever dream that was Future Sight. Spellweaver Volute stands apart from most auras because it enchants an instant in a graveyard. Once attached, every time you cast a sorcery, Volute lets you copy the enchanted instant and cast it for free. Then the original instant is exiled and Volute jumps to another instant in a graveyard. Interestingly, this card avoids one of the main weaknesses of auras, which is that they die when the permanent they're enchanting leaves the battlefield. Since the enchanted card is already in a graveyard, this is much less likely to be a problem. Camouflage is one of those early cards that swings for the fences in terms of flavor, but the end result is pretty messy. On paper, the idea of camouflage is clever. You cast it during your attack step, turn all your attackers face down, shuffle them around, and let your opponent assign blockers blind. Once blockers are declared, creatures are flipped back up. Unfortunately, this is a cumbersome effect that's likely to cause gameplay headaches. This old powerhouse says pay 3, tap, choose a card name, then reveal a card at random from your hand. If that card has the chosen name, Cursed Scroll deals 2 damage to any target. Effectively, if you have exactly one card in hand, this is guaranteed damage. But the card also introduces a fun bluffing element when you have more than one card in hand. For instance, you can name cards that you don't actually have, hoping your opponent plays around them. While a few other cards touch on similar ideas, none matches Cursed Scroll's mix of power, randomness, hand info shenanigans, and bluffing. This 7-mana sorcery says each player hides at least one item. Then all players reveal them simultaneously. Each player loses life equal to the number of items they revealed. The player who revealed the fewest items then loses half their life, rounded up. Yes, this card literally asks players to hide physical objects. I love that one of the notes and rules for the card reads, "When it comes to choice of items, use common sense." Another gem from Future Sight, Bridge from Below is an odd card in that it has a mana cost and is castable, but it only works when it's in your graveyard. It reads, whenever a non-token creature dies, if Bridge from Below is in your graveyard, create a 2/2 zombie. It's powerful as well as quirky. For years, Bridge from Below showed up in fringe brews like Vengevine decks. Then Modern Horizons dropped, and with it Hogarth Arisen Necropolis. Suddenly, Bridge from Below was a key piece in one of Modern's most broken decks, abusing Altar of Dementia and Hogarth to churn through graveyards and flood the board with tokens. Both Bridge and the busted zombie legend were soon banned from the format. Force of Savagery pushed the boundaries of creature stats by being an 8/0 trampler for 3 mana. Obviously, unless you can pump its toughness somehow, it immediately dies on entering the battlefield. But it actually had some synergy in Standard with the Elemental Lord Incandescent Soulstoke. The only creature with stranger combat stats than Force of Savagery is Char Rumbler, which also debuted in Future Sight. It's one of only 2 creatures in the game with negative power, the other being Spinal Parasite. In a fun twist, the Rumbler even has Double Strike. Eye of the Storm's effect is as follows. Whenever a player casts an instant or sorcery card, exile it. Then that player copies each instant or sorcery card exiled with this enchantment. For each copy, the player may cast the copy without paying its mana cost. Basically, when anyone casts an instant or sorcery, it gets exiled under this card, and then you copy all the other ones for free. That includes your opponent's spells. It's a kaleidoscope of chaos, chaining lightning bolts, ponders, and time warps into a single vomit of the stack. Speaking of chaos, Game of Chaos reads, flip a coin. If you win the flip, you gain 1 life and target opponent loses 1 life, and you decide whether to flip again. If you lose the flip, you lose 1 life and that opponent gains 1 life, and that player decides whether to flip again. Double the life stakes with each flip. While not very good on its own, this card gets interesting when paired with effects that let you redo your coin flips or ignore lost flips. This 4-mana green enchantment says, creatures can't attack a player unless that player cast a spell or put a non-token permanent onto the battlefield during their last turn. It turns the game into a strange cold war of passivity, where nothing becomes the most defensive action. It's a unique form of collective punishment that rewards restraint and punishes actually playing Magic. Each player may bid life. You start the bidding with a bid of any number. In turn order, each player may top the high bid. The bidding ends if the high bid stands. The high bidder loses life equal to the high bid and draws 4 cards. Basically, Payne's Reward forces all players into a dangerous wager that comes with high upside and potentially a ton of life loss. This 1-mana blue sorcery says reveal a card in your hand, then put that card onto the battlefield if it has the same name as a permanent. So it lets you cheat a permanent into play as long as another copy of that permanent is already on the battlefield. A fun effect that can be pretty powerful in the right build. Paradox Haze is an aura that gives a player an extra upkeep. While weird, it can provide a lot of value, which is why you can't get them for less than about $5, despite being an uncommon. This 9/5 green worm with trample costs 7 mana. Its ability reads, while you're searching your library, you may cast Panglacial Worm from your library. So you can play a fetch land or rampant growth, start searching, and suddenly the worm charges in mid-search. Except that shouldn't work. Normally, you can't cast spells while another is resolving. But Panglacial Worm overrides this thanks to a rule that allows cards to break protocol if they clearly say so. So in practice, you cast Rampant Growth, begin searching, spot the worm, and cast it from your library. Then Rampant Growth finishes, your land enters tapped, and the worm resolves. In short, with Panglacial Worm in your deck, tutors and fetch lands all become potential summoning rituals. This equipment gives the equipped creature every name in Magic. It's a mechanical enabler for cards that care about specific names, like Relentless Rats. It's niche, bizarre, and deeply flavorful. Spykit turns any creature into a shape-shifting imposter with forged credentials and an infinite list of aliases. Serum Powder is a 3-mana artifact that taps for colorless. However, the real draw, no pun intended, is its pre-game effect. Anytime you could mulligan and Serum Powder is in your hand, you may exile all cards from your hand, then draw that many. When you draw your opening 7, you can keep it, mulligan it, or, if Serum Powder is there, exile your hand and draw a fresh 7. If you've got a powder, you've got a free reset. Once the game starts, this card is basically a blank, just a colorless mana rock. That means every deck that runs it becomes a bit of a gamble. More copies of a dead card in exchange for greater opening hand consistency. This trade-off is worth it in a glass cannon strategy that must find its combo piece. One of the few cards that can get counters while it's on the stack, Lightning Storm is a burn spell that gets stronger the more lands you discard while it's resolving, and the target can change hands if your opponent discards more lands than you. It's used as a win con in some ad nauseam decks. Bonus flavor points for the fact that Lightning Storm uses charge counters. Equip this sword, deal combat damage, and boom, everything dies. Lands, creatures, artifacts, all of it except Worldslayer itself. Worldslayer is a dare masquerading as a win condition, rewarding only those who can build a cockroach deck, something that endures the apocalypse Worldslayer unleashes. This sorcery lets you rip your opponent's hand away and replace it with cards of your own choosing from their library. It costs 3 and 2 black and says, target opponent puts the cards from their hand on top of their library. Search that player's library for that many cards. The player puts those cards into their hand, then shuffles. So the idea is to take away their hand and replace it with the worst hand possible. Generally, you'd be trying to give them all lands or all irrelevant answers. This 4-mana enchantment reads, at the beginning of each upkeep, count the number of permanents. If the number is odd, until end of turn, red creatures get +1/+1, and whenever a player taps a mountain for mana, that player adds an additional red. If the number is even, until end of turn, red creatures get -1/-1, and if a player taps a mountain for mana, that mountain produces colorless mana instead of any other type. This is one of the most convoluted, fiddly upkeep triggers in Magic history, designed for only the most devout lovers of randomness and bookkeeping. Another quirky red enchantment, Grip of Chaos randomly reselects every targeted spell or ability to a random legal target, turning removal, auras, etc. into absolute anarchy. Games with Grip of Chaos devolve into fever dreams, where Swords to Plowshares might hit your own creature, and Door to Nothingness becomes Russian roulette. The oracle text of Guided Passage is as follows. Reveal the cards in your library. An opponent chooses from among them a creature card, a land card, and a non-creature, non-land card. You put the chosen cards into your hand, then shuffle. It's a strange mix of generosity and manipulation, perfect for political play. You get cards, but only the ones your opponent picks, and at the cost of showing them your entire library. Interestingly, your opponent doesn't actually search your library, so they can't simply fail to find. Dance with Calamity, 8-mana red sorcery. Shuffle your library. As many times as you choose, you may exile the top card of your library. If the total mana value of the cards exiled this way is 13 or less, you may cast any number of spells from among those cards without paying their mana costs. A very unorthodox and finicky way of casting spells for free. This card also lets you exile your entire library if you choose, giving it synergy with effects like Thassa's Oracle. Floodgate is an old favorite. Here's the text on this 4-mana blue wall creature. Defender. When this creature has flying, sacrifice it. When this creature leaves the battlefield, it deals damage to each non-blue creature without flying, equal to half the number of islands you control rounded down. A brilliant fusion of flavor and function. Amazingly goofy. Niv Magus Elemental is a 1/2 creature that costs 1 hybrid blue or red mana. Izzet has lots of creatures that get stronger whenever you cast instants and sorceries, but this little guy takes that idea even further. It has an activated ability saying, exile an instant or sorcery spell you control, put 2 +1/+1 counters on this creature. that spell won't resolve. Essentially, you can counter your own instants and sorceries to grow Niv Magus Elemental into a formidable threat. It can be scary when paired with the 0 mana pacts from Future Sight and storm cards like Grapeshot and Ground Rift, since it can exile copies as well. Until next time, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, and consider joining my Patreon. That's the best way to support the channel and allow me to make more videos.